Victoria's Parliament will consider new laws today that would change the way a pandemic is handled in the state. The Andrews government's legislation sidelines the Chief Medical Officer and transfers power to declare a pandemic to the Premier and the Health Minister. Live now to Julia Bradley. Julia, the health advice would be required to be made public, which is a welcome move, but the opposition says many of the changes are a huge overreach.
The opposition here in Victoria, Laura, argue that these laws go too far. They don't want pandemic laws to be made permanent. These laws set to be debated in Victoria's Parliament today would give unprecedented power to Premier Daniel Andrews to declare future pandemics and keep that declaration going in blocks of 3 months. It's also understood that the Premier would be able to declare a pandemic even if there were no cases of a particular disease in Victoria for some time. The opposition is arguing that even though there are checks and balances, these powers simply go too far. The checks and balances include that it will contain stronger safeguards to withhold QR code check-in data from law enforcement. There will also be an independent committee which will scrutinise key government decisions. But while this body will be able to scrutinise government decisions, it won't be able to veto the power of government. As you say as well, Laura, all of the health advice which underpins these decisions will be made public, but the opposition isn't confident that that would go hand in hand with the decision, and instead that health advice would come after the decision is made.
It's not as if he's lacked power and he's now seeking to giving himself even more powers. It's terrifying. It's wrong. We will be opposing it vociferously to the very core of our beings. This is so wrong. It's so illiberal. And I call on the government to reconsider this draconian legislation.
Now, under these new powers, it would be our health minister who has the power to introduce special orders as opposed to our chief health officer, which is a big difference between these laws to be debated today and the current state of emergency powers that the government has at the moment and that is due to expire in December. We heard our health minister this morning outside of Parliament call the opposition hysterical.
Hysterical oppositionalist nonsense that we've heard from the opposition, who have chased every conspiratorial rabbit down every tinfoil hat brigade rabbit burrow over the course of this pandemic, and true to form have done so again. The leader of the opposition stood about right here 2 weeks ago calling for precisely what the crossbenchers have delivered.
We've also heard from key crossbenchers this morning who say they weren't properly consulted on these new laws.
Except for 3 crossbenchers, none of the crossbenchers now have seen this legislation, been briefed about it or anything. Everything we've found out is through the media. And that's a disgrace because we all represent people.
I think it's extremely disrespectful of the upper house that crossbenchers weren't consulted on the legislation. And it's very typical of this government.
It's extremely disappointing that we weren't part of the discussions. We're not the cool kids at school, apparently.
The tabling of this bill comes after intense negotiations between the Andrews government and 3 key upper house crossbenchers. The government hopes that this law could come into effect in December. No doubt there will be some fiery exchanges today, Laura, given just how long Victorians have been in lockdown and living under COVID rules.
Julia Bradley, thank you.